So now we're going to talk about how you're actually going to do the interviews that you'll do for this class. Remember that you'll have a report on these interviews that you have done, and you'll see that within the assignments on Canvas. We're going to start with where you're going to find people. So start with location. And so I want you to get out some scratch paper and list out 10 places that you think that you could find people who would potentially be your customers. It's not just physical locations, but maybe online forums, places where you could reach out to people in person and also online to find them. So where would these people be in greater abundance? Where would they be recreating or learning, talking to peers? And I want you to be specific about this. You can just pause the video, and once you come up with 10 places, you can come back to the video. Now I want you to sort these places into 2 piles. Those that you can go to in the next 2 weeks. Again, the focus here is on acting now, not trying to be perfect. And then any other place. And it's not that you're not ever going to go back to that other pile, but we want to focus on the ones that we can do right now. So I'll give you a little bit of time to sort those into the 2 piles. Select the ones that you can go to in the next 2 weeks. Now we're going to discuss, what are you trying to get out of these interviews? We're going to work backward from what the goal of the interview is. What you want to get is you want them to be telling you stories about specific experiences that illustrate an idea really well. So you want stories. So you're not going to ask them just a list of questions. And hopefully they're going to mention something to you that you never even thought about asking. That's why we're doing these open-ended interviews. So most of the time you're going to be listening, 90% of the time. These interviews are not saying, hey, do you want to buy my product? You're not even going to show your product to them during the interview. Now you might do it after the interview, but it's not going to be focused on your product. So I just want you to remember that. Remember that customer discovery is focusing on the problem, not your solution yet. And you want them to be talking about specifics about their most recent 6 to 12 months, and not really talking about other people or generalities. You want them to talk about their own experience. So again, you're looking for stories that show that you know for sure that your riskiest assumptions are either true or false. And what were those stories about? They'll either give you confidence that you're on the right track or really indicate that maybe you're not on the right track. This should connect with your value proposition. So I'll give you an example. A group that was creating an app for helping students audition for musical theater. And so the original value proposition was something like, gives you confidence in auditions for musical theater. What would indicate that that is true or false? If you interviewed a bunch of kids that auditioned for musical theater, and one of them said, for example, that they went to an audition and their accompanist didn't know the music and they messed up, and because of that mess up, they got nervous and then they screwed up and they didn't get the part. That would be a great story to indicate that the assumption that students are lacking confidence because of a problem with an accompanist is true. So that's a great one indicating that the assumptions underlying the idea are true. Now, alternatively, you could do some interviews where customers have great experience in their auditions and they got every part, and maybe one of them might say, yeah, my accompanist knows anything. She always does a great job, and she gives me a lot of confidence by having her there. Okay, so that would be a story that says, well, maybe there isn't really the problem that I think that there is here that needs to be solved. Again, you're looking for stories that indicate that there really is a problem there or there really isn't a problem. Both types of stories. And if there is the problem there, that means that your riskiest assumptions are true. If there's not the problem there, your riskiest assumptions are false. Because if there's not the problem, then it doesn't need to be solved. So I want you to think about that for a while. You may need to give me some emails about that if you're unclear about that. So now you're going to reverse engineer some questions so that you could get those types of stories that we just identified in the last slide. You're going to start the question with, can you tell me a story about when? You're going to try to have at least 3 different questions, and all of your questions are going to start with, can you tell me a story about when? And I give you a little sheet to help you record that, just to help you take notes, but you could do it on scratch paper or whatever. You're not actually going to give me this physical copies of your notes. You're going to ask these different types of questions, and again, all of the questions are going to be, can you tell me a story about when? So back to the app to give you confidence for an audition, you would say, can you tell me a story about when you auditioned for a part and how that went? So that's a really open-ended question, and if you ask it that open-ended and they mention some of the stories that we mentioned before, that's going to be really good insight. You could also ask a question like, can you tell me a story about some of the accompanists that you've had? Again, that kind of question could be answered in a way that would indicate that there is a problem with the accompanist, or it could also indicate that there isn't a problem. So a key thing here is that you're trying to ask a question that's really open-ended and could be answered in a way that either supports you or doesn't support the presence of a problem. Think about that for a while. Come up with at least 3 questions that start with, can you tell me a story about when? And then we'll move on. Okay, so now we're just going to get to the nuts and bolts of it. You got to start a conversation with someone. A really easy way to do that is introducing yourself and saying, hi, I'm a student. People want to help you as a student, so they're likely to want to help you. And then you can say, I'm trying to understand my customer better for this class, and I think you might be the exact type of person that I'm thinking of. You can talk a little bit before you get into the questions. And so some of the do's is come with a topic map. Come with these questions written down, at least 3 questions that are open-ended. You should take notes. You should try to get their story, have them tell you stories, and you should be listening. You should practice it, especially if you feel uncomfortable. Practice with someone who you trust, and smile. What you shouldn't do is you shouldn't be talking about your product. You shouldn't be asked, what do you think of this product? You shouldn't be talking very much. You shouldn't ask leading questions. My example from the app for auditioning, I asked questions that they could answer in a way that would indicate that there is a problem or there isn't a problem. And a leading question would be like, tell me the story about the last time you had a problem with an accompanist. Okay, so again, this is a leading question because you're trying to have them indicate to you how there is a problem, but you're leading them to the answer. You want to ask the question in a way that doesn't indicate that you're trying to say that there's a problem with the accompaniment. You don't really need to talk about future behavior, and you're not trying to sell. This is not a sales attempt, although after the interview you can try to sell. In class, we would practice this with a partner. If you're doing this online, you could practice with someone else that you have near to you that is willing to help you. Okay, so you must take notes. You're not actually going to give me the actual notes, but you should have good quotes. So you want to have direct quotes that you can include in your interview report. You should record them as soon as possible after you're done. You should also record some of the details related to their customer segments so that you can see if there's differences between the responses you're getting that might indicate how you should sell. So you should record that kind of information. And I give you a sheet to record that information on. And at the end of the interview, as I said before, you can try to indicate to them what you're actually selling. So you can, after the end of the interview, sell. You need to do at least 20 interviews. If you try to sell to them, you want to record all of these customer segment details and every sales attempt so that you can later report that in the selling report. And I'll show you how to record that. That's the end. Again, you're doing these interviews because you don't know what you don't know. You don't know what the real needs are. An idea might come up that you had never thought about. In order to do the interviews well, you have to have a real systematic process. And the whole point is to try to help save time and money and avoid false positives.